Hey, folks. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may be tuning in from, and welcome back to Kadena Campfire. We have a really exciting session with you here today. We have a few folks we're going to add on the stream here. We, of course, have Doug, our regular favorite. Welcome back, Doug. Thanks for
Hey
joining us
everyone.
again.
Thanks,
Uh,
Tyler.
Absolutely. And also very, very excited that we have Nick here with us from Teller. Nick, welcome to the stream.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yeah, our pleasure. So we'll do a brief introductions here, and then we'll go into a quick update and discussion, and finally we'll go into the live Q&A. So please be sure to ask questions on YouTube, on Twitter, on Discord, on LinkedIn, wherever you may be tuning in from, and we'll try to get to as many as we can. So first, briefly, Doug, would you mind introducing yourself to anyone on the stream that hasn't seen you before?
I think I'm pretty much known to everyone. I've been with Kadena for, I don't know, 5 years, something like that. Done all kinds of things in all kinds of different areas of the company, and mostly focused on engineering. So I tend to answer the tech focused questions.
Awesome. Hey, Nick, you're up, man.
All right, yeah, I'll give a quick little intro. My name's Nick Fett. I'm one of the founders of Teller. So we're a decentralized Oracle. We launched on Ethereum almost 4 years ago now, and we're super excited because we're here today talking about our journey over to Kadena and building on them and becoming an Oracle over there to sort of support their ecosystem.
Right on. And I'm Tyler. I'm tech adoption lead at Kadena Eco. Been hosting some of these campfires for the last few weeks and really looking forward to getting into some of the content here today. So we'll move into a brief update and discussion. So I'll start a little bit on the Kadena Eco side. Pass it to Doug in case he has anything he wants to add. And then we'll jump into some of the big news of today. So first of all, at ETH Denver, a lot of the Kadena team was in Colorado this past week and had a really successful conference. Among other highlights, our COO, Chief Operating Officer Anastasia Bez, was featured on Bloomberg and Bloomberg TV even, and was live for about 10 minutes, if not more, speaking about Pack, Chainweb, and building businesses on Kadena. So that was pretty freaking cool to see the mainstream media picking up Kadena like that, and especially given ETH Denver going on, highlighting Kadena. So definitely go find and check out that clip if you haven't already. Is pretty badass. Secondly, we have a quick update from Kadena Eco grantee Hypercent, who successfully launched their NFT marketplace and is working to showcase the features Marmalade brings to the future of NFTs. So congratulations, Hypercent. Awesome to see that. And then finally, huge news here is we have a grantee announcement, which is Teller. So we have Nick with us here today, and really, really stoked. And we're going to jump to Teller in just one moment, but first wanted to pass it to Doug to see if he had any updates he wanted to add.
Yeah, not a whole lot new. The last time I was here, we had a fair amount of engineering activity to announce, and engineering kind of takes time. So not much new this week.
Right on. So Nick, I think everyone is eager to hear a little bit about Teller. We've hinted over some of the past campfires that there might be some news about an Oracle coming, and today's the day. So maybe you could have us kick it off by telling folks in the audience, what is Teller?
Sure. So just to kind of, Teller is, we've thrown around this word a bunch already, a decentralized Oracle. So an Oracle is something that actually gets information from off-chain and puts it on-chain. So the classic example is, let's say, this was actually what we were building before we started Teller. We were trying to build a derivatives protocol. So you can think of a basic derivatives protocol as two different people will put money into a smart contract, and they'll say if the price of Bitcoin goes up, then one person gets the money, but if the price of Bitcoin goes down, the other person gets the money. It's a really simple smart contract, but the problem is actually, well, who gets to say what the price of Bitcoin is? Bitcoin doesn't trade natively on top of Kadena or any other ecosystem. So you would actually need to go to a centralized exchange, most likely grab the price and put it on chain. You obviously couldn't have any of the parties who were in the contract put the price on chain because they probably wouldn't agree. Somebody could run away with the money. And this is the Oracle problem. Who do you trust to put that information on chain? Naturally, you could just trust, we trust Tyler. He's a podcast host. He could be the Oracle, and we'll just trust him to put the information on chain. This is the TradFi way of doing things. And the problem there is that, well, now you place trust in Tyler. What happens if something happens to Tyler? We can bribe Tyler. How can you make an Oracle basically something that grabs information from an outside source and put it on chain in a decentralized way? You don't have to trust anyone, and it can sort of be censorship resistant and crypto economically secured rather than secured through some sort of reputation or trust.
Right on. Awesome. So I think that's a pretty natural segue to my next question, which is, since you've sort of beautifully introduced the motivation for why we should care about Teller, why we should care about oracles, maybe we can talk a little bit more about how do oracles work?
Yeah, so I'll go over, there's, as you can imagine, even just the super basic example I gave of the Bitcoin price, there's lots of different ways that oracles can work. You could just trust one person, or you could trust a multi-sig. Those can be oracles. But to go over the specific way that actually Teller works, we have people who will take our native token, which is TRB, and they have to stake it in a smart contract. So they would lock up a certain amount of this token. Right now it's about $1,000. And then you're allowed to be what's called a reporter. When you're a reporter, that means that you're allowed to place information into the smart contract. So let's say that Doug was the person who was writing the betting contract. He would come and ask our smart contract or Oracle contract, hey, what's the price of Bitcoin? I'll pay, and he would add a tip with it as well. So he would say, I'll pay 20 cents to whoever goes and places the price of Bitcoin on chain. All of those staked reporters will now basically be racing to go fetch that price probably from an API and put it on chain. They would put it on chain for Doug's 20 cents. And now anybody can look at that value and they can either read it, see if it's good, or mainly they would probably want to wait a few minutes because anybody can actually dispute it. So if I lied and I said, hey, the price of Bitcoin is $10 million, then anybody can come on and you pay a small fee and you get to dispute it. Whenever you dispute the value, basically it puts it up for a vote. So it'll pull that value aside and say, hey, is this a good or bad value? And then the governance contract, which is basically the token holders and Teller, along with the reporters, would get a vote on whether or not this is a good or bad value. And if it's a bad value, you would slash me. So I locked that money aside. You would slash me and give it to whoever initiated the dispute. Or if the person was just being mean and disputing me for no reason, the reporter would get the dispute fee. But that's the basics, and that's kind of the entire system. People would basically be requesting data, and other people will put information on chain. And the cool thing about this is this was obviously for the Bitcoin price that you can do this, but this works with any data out there. So if you wanted the market cap of an NFT collection, if you wanted information about another chain, so you can think about bridges as oracles. So if you wanted, say, a transaction that happened on Ethereum or a Bitcoin block header, you can just ask the oracle, hey, what was this information? And it'll go and grab it and put it on chain.
Right on. Thanks for that, Nick. I think it's pretty interesting to think about how all these information streams can now come to crypto, can now come to Kadena, thanks to the presence of Teller, as that's what really allows us to do activity on the blockchain that goes beyond what happens on the ledger alone, and actually be able to interface with the real world. So a really key and interesting piece of technology. I have just one or two more questions to help frame the discussion, and then I see we already have some really cool questions coming in on the live chat. Also wanted to give a quick update / shout out that we're doing something new today, which is we're going to be awarding a coveted pink Kadena hoodie to the person that asks the best question, as determined by Nick. So please make sure to get some questions in, and that's right, the best question today will be receiving one of these super cool Kadena hoodies. So you can get stoked about that. All right, Nick, my next question for you is, what makes you stand apart from other oracles?
Sure. So I think this was this will probably kind of tie directly into the like why are we building on Kadena question. But the answer is actually we sort of pin ourselves as kind of the most decentralized Oracle. We really focus on how can we make ourselves censorship resistant? How can we sort of remove any sort of trust that you have to have in the team or in any piece? The oracles that most people have heard about is probably Chainlink. So Chainlink is a very, very large oracle. And underneath the hood, basically, you have to rely on kind of they have kind of a multi-sig and a group of trusted parties who will grab the information and place it on chain for you. If you're fine with those trust assumptions, then they can be a good oracle. But Teller, for instance, there is no trusted party in the system, and anybody can sort of come on and take part in the system and be a reporter or request data.
Right on. So cool opportunity for those that want to get further involved in, I think, some potentially, yield adjacent opportunities, right? Ways to earn on crypto by supplying information via Teller. So that'll be interesting to see as community and folks start building what information sources people want and what information sources people start providing. So my last question for you, then we'll turn it over to the live Q&A, is why did you choose Kadena to build on?
Yeah, kind of like this one. I think it comes down to like an alignment of values. Whenever you're looking at where are people going to want a censorship resistant oracle at, it's going to be people who are trying to build decentralized chains, and that's something that Kadena is sort of doing. We actually just found, I was just talking to my co-founder, like we were actually proof of work early on as well in the Teller ecosystem. So we had one of the earlier versions of Teller, you had to stake, and then you also had to complete some proof of work in order to be a reporter. And yeah, just found out that some of the earliest FPGA software that people were building to mine Teller was KDA/TRB miners that people were building. So it was, it's kind of cool. We had since moved on from proof of work, but now you're sort of coming back to being around that ecosystem. Our earliest community members were these kind of proof of work miners, which is kind of the exact same as your early community as well. And so it's kind of nice that we have like a sort of a mix of community, and being able to come over there and be an oracle is really cool.
All right, awesome. So I think we will now switch over to the live Q&A section. And for this, you can ask questions of Nick about Teller, for me about Kadena Eco, for Doug about Kadena. So we'll have all bases covered here, and look forward to seeing what discussion we get into here. I'm sort of catching up on the live stream here, so we have a ton of questions. Let's see here. Okay, here's an interesting one from Brian Adams. How do you prevent people from creating multiple stakes as reporters or validators and slash or dispute honest reporters in order to manipulate the outcome of their contracts?
You don't. Yeah, no. The way that you built the system is as long as you would assume that the vote is secure. So like bad reports are going to be slashed and good reports are not going to be slashed. Then you can come on and make a bajillion fake reports. That's a-okay in the system. All what you want to do is actually, whenever the person is reading the smart contract, they want to make sure that they have a delay. So they add it into, so, in our example of Doug reading the Bitcoin price, he would probably want to wait, say, 15 minutes before he reads the Bitcoin price. That way he keeps in that time for disputes to happen. And if you wanted to come on and put on a bad value, it's going to get disputed. Doug would probably happily dispute you yourself because he'll pay a small dispute fee and then he'll keep your whole stake. He'll do that all day, every day. It's just free money. And the way that you build the system is you can't really, prevent in a way bad actors from doing that. In the same way, like how do you prevent bad actors from coming on and mining bad blocks on Bitcoin or something? And it's like, well, you don't. You just sort of assume that the system will correct itself over time. It's not like you have some specific piece in there. It's like you just sort of over time assume that the good actors are going to outnumber the bad actors, and it's going to move on because everyone is sort of, you align in such a way, as long as people still care about profit and want to make money, it's crypto economically secured.
All right. Let's see here. Actually, maybe this is an interesting question for both Nick and Doug. Nick, I'll pass off to you first. How does your team plan to stay ahead of the constantly evolving blockchain industry and technology?
I mean, this one's super tough. Like we've as a company, we've been alive as an Oracle for almost 4 years now. Well, we've almost been live now for 4 years, and everything sort of changes. Like we've had to pivot just the broad narratives of how you think of things. Originally when we launched, it was we were trying to build on just Ethereum, and that was kind of that was the big game in town. And if you launched on Ethereum, you were okay. But now we've moved into a world where there are other blockchains that you can deploy on. So just sort of making sure that you're really flexible. I think some of the pieces that haven't changed, are just sort of the core values, as long as you sort of hinge on those. Like, we're trying to build censorship resistant technology that can enable people to do things that enhance their freedoms, and that governance can't stop. So it's one of those things that just staying aligned at the core principles, and then making sure that you're flexible as far as the technologies that you can, whether it's coming over and learning Pact and being able to deploy on this, or making sure that your structure works within some sort of, roll-up structure that might develop in the future. It's definitely tough, but just making sure you don't think that you have it solved, and you're willing to kind of change it over time. On to Doug.
Hey, Doug, pass it over to you here too.
Sorry, I was just dealing with this construction noise in the background. My bad.
No worries. So, question to Doug is, as well from the Kadena side, how does your team plan to stay ahead of the constantly evolving blockchain industry and technology?
Well, I mean, we are ahead, like by a lot, because we're the only place, blockchain out there that actually can scale. So as far as I'm concerned, like, the rest of the industry is playing catch up with us. It's really a question of, whether people actually care about scalability or not. But that being said, we're not just sitting around doing nothing. We're constantly working to improve Pact in ways that, we haven't even thought of before. When issues arise, we dig in and we really try to figure out how can we not just like paper over this problem in the most immediate sense, but like how can we wipe out the problem as much as possible going forward. We've done this in the past, and we're going to continue to do that in the future. We take a really careful, fundamentals-based theoretical look at the problems of decentralization and languages. We have like tons of really experienced people in these areas, and we're bringing the top talent to bear on the problems that we're dealing with.
Awesome. We have another question for Nick from Joe Monocle. How do you see the Oracle industry evolving in the next few years, and what new technologies or approaches do you think will play a key role in enhancing the security, scalability, and reliability of Oracle systems in blockchain and other decentralized applications?
This is one, kind of back to the previous question, I've definitely changed my mind on over probably the past year or two. You see how are Oracle sort of changing over time. And, whenever we started this journey of, becoming an Oracle, it was like the only option for Oracles, like, 4 or 5 years ago, there was Oracleize or Augur. So you had really slow prediction markets, or you had to trust like some guy running a server in England. And those were your Oracle options. And now you sort of see a whole bunch of different options along the scale of, where are you making trade-offs in terms of decentralization, in terms of scalability or security. And I just see it sort of honing itself out a little bit more. So there will be certain Oracle designs that work really good for price feeds. There will be certain pieces that work really well for, bridges or that sort of data. But more so, I just think the way that people are using them is constantly, that's the big change we've seen over the past year. People are actually seeing like, oh man, like I probably can't use Uniswap as a sole price source. That's making sure that you actually have a decentralized oracle put in place or a fallback oracle whenever those sorts of things happen. And same with, you see all these bridge hacks, people are starting to realize like, oh man, maybe it's probably not the best idea to just have a multi-sig run by its single team as our oracle. I think just the oracle industry is going to evolve, and that people are actually going to start demanding trustlessness on behalf of the oracles. Other than that, I think some of the more interesting pieces over the next few years are people are going to start putting on more unique data sources. So oracles right now are just grabbing these, one-off informations. Like how do we get API information on chain? How do we get, transaction data from Ethereum and put it onto Kadena? Those are really important. But the next piece is like, how do you transform the data, and what do the companies that transform it look like? So, like an example would be like, let's say you wanted, the classic one is, let's say you wanted the CPI. So like, how would you do a decentralized CPI or inflation index? How would you do, global prices where, there aren't necessarily single data sources for it? How are you aggregating these, and how are you thinking of these? I think the next move for oracles is to sort of expand what they do from just sort of being this middleware software that is decentralized into actually providing more of a service on top, more of sort of this transformative piece, and that can only sort of exist in a decentralized world. So good question though. I can't hear you, Tyler.
Oh, thank you. I have myself on mute. All right, Joe. Sounds like you're in the running for a hoodie, but we'll have to see who Nick settles on.
Oh, yeah.
All right. Masha 19A. I'm not sure how to pronounce that, but we sort of
Machina.
fumbled that. Oh, Machina. Okay. Well, yeah. In any case, please ask Doug what determines the position of transactions in a block if they all use the same gas price.
Oh, great question. It's really up to the miners. Whoever constructs the block, miners are running code that constructs a block and sends the block header off to their mining equipment to be mined. In some cases, pools do this as well for all of their users. If you're solo mining, then your software does it. And the miners are the ones that have control over that. And to be honest, they don't even have to put the highest gas price, but this is the case for all proof of work blockchains. The whole system is designed around people acting in their own self-interest. And if one miner wants to do something one way, okay, that doesn't mean that that's going to be the way that happens for the whole network, because there's other miners out there. And it's a very egalitarian competition of hash power for to mine a block first. And just because maybe I have a little more hash power than you doesn't mean that I mine every block. It's probabilistic, and so this is precisely what makes Nakamoto consensus and Bitcoin's innovation so cool. Is it really distributes this problem and creates kind of like a marketplace of different approaches that people could use to construct blocks.
All right. I'll have another question here for Doug. I see Hayes asked this on Discord, and also I think Pat has been asking on the live chat. How would Kadena thwart a 51% or double spend or eclipse type of attack if 95% of nodes went down and 100 evil mining nodes joined the network?
Okay. So this question actually has a bit of a misconception, and it's a little bit of a subtle distinction, but a lot of people aren't clear on it about what a node is and how that relates to mining. So if 95% of the nodes went down, that has no impact on double spend attack. Like the nodes are not the ones necessarily doing the mining. Now, if you are mining, you do have to run a node, but not everyone running a node is mining. And so, if the nodes that went down aren't the mining nodes, guess what? It has no impact on the network whatsoever. Again, kind of like the last question, this is a thing that is very much, if it applies to Kadena, it applies to Bitcoin, it applies to all the other proof of work blockchains out there. But nodes are not hash power. Now, perhaps what they, if I kind of read between the lines of the question, what if they're asking, well, what happens if 95% of the hash power drops off? And we have actually seen this quite some time ago, like probably in the first six to 9 months after the network launched. We did have some pretty significant hash rate drops. And so first of all, what happens is like the network slows down because there's not as much hash power solving those proof of work problems. But we have actually seen that our network is able to survive very nicely, even with very, very large drops in hash power like that, upwards of 90%. Now, double spend attacks, well, a double spend attack would get easier, but I feel like the person asking this question doesn't really appreciate the immense amount of hash power that is out there in the network. Like it's just gone up like a million X or something crazy since we started. And so even if we had a 95% drop in hash power, the amount of hash power that it would take to double spend is still huge. And it's a very difficult thing to pull off. And then in many cases, like anyone who might find themselves in that position, like say a large pool, they are probably not going to be incentivized to do a double spend attack because they're interested in preserving the health of the ecosystem. And this is how, again, decentralization wins here and works the same way with Bitcoin. There are a bunch of pools out there. So the pools are not typically really unbalanced in hash power. And so in order to have a 95% drop in hash power, you'd have to have multiple pools go out at the same time. And, the longer we go and the more the hash power grows and the more pools and solo miners and other people get out there, the harder that is to conceive of. And it's been basically inconceivable for a long time now. But back in the earliest days, maybe there were some issues where we saw something like that. The network can continue and can keep producing blocks just fine, and the odds of that happening are just so small. You're muted again, Tyler.
Thank you. Each time I sip my tea, you got to remember to unmute. Yeah, thanks for that answer, Doug. We have a few more questions rolling in. Want to make sure we get back to Nick as well. Zero knowledge approach applies to oracles as well. Is Tyler planning to head into the ZK Oracle space? And yeah, Nick, I guess, what are your thoughts around ZK and oracles?
Yeah, so I can answer this one. So like we're working with one customer. They're doing they're passing proofs across chains. It's more of like a bridge function. So for those that don't know, like this question, I'll kind of talk about it. But like a zero knowledge proof, like the basic one would be like a tornado cache. Like everyone deposits 100 ETH and a secret, and then they place that secret into a Merkle tree. And then whenever you want to go and withdraw your 100 ETH, you can do so with a different address. And all you have to do is submit basically the different address and then a proof that a secret that is in and that it's also in that Merkle tree. So like there's this prover function, this prover solidity contract out there that knows basically how to look inside of a Merkle tree and figure out is your secret in there or not, but without disclosing obviously the location, or else you would know who it was. anyway, the issue with oracles is it's really hard to create generic things with zero knowledge proofs, because like, how could you say, if you wanted to like say the validity of anything, our oracle, you can ask it, who won the Super Bowl, what's the price of Bitcoin, what's the API call, what's this Ethereum transaction header, and it makes it super tough. There's no such thing as like a generic prover. So it very much limits you in the ZK oracle space. So we're not necessarily looking at it for like the broad-based teller solution, but we're playing around with it like for very specific pieces. What you can do is, the one that some people are looking at right now is like, you could use like TLS notary proofs. So like whenever you like call an API or something like that, it'll basically give you back a signature, and then you could submit a proof of that signature along with the API call, and then you would have basically it proves that you didn't manipulate the result from that API. Obviously, there's some issues there, like you're still trusting whoever's hosting that API, not to lie, which may not fit with your decentralization piece. But yeah, there's a lot of stuff that has to do with like zero knowledge proofs and oracles. It's still like kind of in the super early stage, and the other part too is one of the bigger pieces kind of with you don't necessarily need an oracle to do it if it's completely trustless. So like oracles are needed for more generic data that you put on chain, and you can't prove its validity on chain. Like the Bitcoin price, for instance, like if you could just in a smart contract verify that it was correct, then you wouldn't use Teller and their whole staking disputing mechanism. There would be no need. You can just place it in your smart contract and you already know that it's correct. So it wouldn't necessarily be an oracle, but just more of like how do you use zero knowledge proofs to prove something in your smart contract. Hope that answered your question.
Yeah, no, I think so. That was great. Continuing the thread of slightly more technical questions, I wanted to go back to an earlier one asked by Pad. Should oracles run some kind of consensus mechanism like BFT on response data from multiple sources?
Yeah, so this is the API problem is tough. Like we try and tell people the problem there is kind of like we were talking about the zero knowledge proof one. Like if you rely on one API call, then there's a point of centralization. So if you're like, what's the price of, like if the answer to what's the price of Bitcoin is the Coinbase API, that's a really big problem because Coinbase could basically just shut it off at any point. And part of this comes down to whenever you're building your DeFi contracts, what we allow you to do in Teller is you get to set the specificity for what you actually want back. So whenever you define, like, I want the Bitcoin price, you could say, hey, I want the Bitcoin price from Coinbase. Or you could say, I want the Bitcoin price from Coinbase, Binance, and Kraken. That's better. Or you could even make it more abstract. You could say, I just want a valid Bitcoin price. Now you leave it up to actually, anybody can just grab a valid Bitcoin price. And as long as the network of disputers thinks that that's an okay Bitcoin price at the time, they won't dispute it. And that one is probably the most censorship resistant in that, like, those three APIs couldn't conclude. But at the same time, there's downfalls because now there's probably like, what's a valid price of Bitcoin? Well, there's probably a 1% or 2% wiggle room in that thing that people could put in, and you probably aren't going to get disputed because I'm sure on one exchange it is. So pros and cons. But yeah, you definitely just have to figure out which way that you're sort of willing to. Are you okay with more API centralization? Obviously, if your coin only trades on one exchange, probably a really easy one. Just pick that exchange. You're trustworthy of them anyway. But if hopefully you can have it more abstract and you're sort of okay with some of those price movements. So
right on.
Works.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Question from Fluxy. When will we see multi-chain dApp tutorials? So one quick update there. I actually saw Sterling Long in ETH Denver this past week, and I know he has a small grant to build out a multi-chain IDO, open source that code with some information around it, and he's still working on that and intends to wrap that up in the near future. I'd also say that I'm always very excited to talk with builders that want to build more tutorials or information on how to build multi-chain applications and open sourcing code. So feel free to get in touch with me or anyone else at Kadena Eco. But and finally, what I would say is that What's interesting with transaction throughput is oftentimes we see at these peak moments of demand that it congests the network. And of course, this was the inspiration behind chain web in general, which is that if chain 8 is congested, then chains 0 through 7 can still proceed and chug along, and other applications won't be as affected by one application having this huge spike in demand. But yeah, I think there is still an element of, like the early 2000s or late 1990s, when we switched from single core processors to multi-core processors, there's an element of a lot of people in blockchain and crypto have been working in a single sequential ledger world. And so scaling applications across multiple chains is something is pretty novel. And so I expect that as Hyperset and other folks have more time to develop and mature products, that we'll see more and more applications leveraging the multi-chain nature. So yeah, I think there's a bunch of ways one could do that, whether that's different NFT collections being managed by different chains, or there's, I think, a number of ways that someone could think about how to scale across multiple chains. So I think it's a great question, and something that we're all working on together, and would certainly encourage people to reach out if they want to work on this more in open source code.
Nice answer, Tyler. I just have to throw out there, you literally like took the words out of my head. Late 90s, early 2000s, this question today is equivalent to asking in the late 90s or early 2000s, when are we going to see multi-core programming tutorials? And guess what? Like, the world was still figuring out all of the best patterns for how to do that stuff back then. And so, the blockchain world is figuring this stuff out today. Cliff notes, like, spoiler alert, probably be pretty useful to go back and see what people did in the multi-core arena, because I suspect that a lot of those techniques are going to be applicable to multiple blockchains. You're still muted.
Thank you. God, I need like an auto unmute function. I think we're coming towards the end of our session here today, but we have time for just a couple more questions. There's been really great engagement today, and I'm trying to catch up with all the wonderful questions and comments. Let's see here. Oh, here's kind of a fun one for Nick. What are some of the most unexpected applications of oracles that you have seen recently?
Oh man. Yeah, I don't know. We're working with one team. They're making an S&P 500 of NFTs. So you can just, we're aggregating the top oracle, the top NFT market cap collections, and then that's like one index, and then you can push it on. We've been working on implementing that one. That's a project called Mimicry. Some of the other cool ones I was talking about, the zero knowledge proofs. There's one that's they're taking basically deposits on one chain, like in a Tornado Cash, and then they're passing the proofs over to another chain for withdrawal. That's super cool. Yeah, those are probably some of the more basic ones, I guess. I don't know. We don't get too many crazy unexpected ones. Most people doing crazy unexpected things don't even think of the Oracle problem.
All right. And Doug, I think we may have volunteered such to put you on the spot on our last campfire. But could we get a quick sign tutorial? I think there's a lot of interest in this. And what do you think, Doug? Do you think we could bring you on one of these days? Or who should we ask?
Yeah, I mean, we have documentation. So like, I don't know. Everyone has different pictures that come into their head when they think about like how to learn things. But ultimately the documentation is really where you go to, and you look at the specification for the kind of messages that you send in and what gets sent back. And that information is all out there. Now, if you want to see someone building an application, yeah, we can probably get that. But as I usually do, I will repeat my often mentioned refrain of like, Kadena can't do everything here. Like if you're waiting on Kadena to solve all of your problems, guess what? you're going to be disappointed because what we're trying to do is way, way bigger than any one person or one particular thing. So yeah, if you're a developer, play around with it. Put out a tutorial, get in touch with us. We are focusing on very carefully thought out, high priority items. And if your pet project hasn't gotten into the list, then maybe you should take some initiative and dive into it yourself. That's really the way that this ecosystem grows. But noted, we will put that on the list and see what we can come up with. And you're still muted.
I'm going to practice this. I'm going to have a private live stream for just my mother and father, and we're going to do the unmute mute thing. We're going to figure it out. Thanks for your patience. Anyways, folks, this has been a really wonderful live stream and chat. Nick, can't thank you enough for being on here with us today. We're super stoked about Teller and can't wait to see what the community does with the implementation. So what a delightful way to introduce you to the community and for the community to learn a little bit more about what Teller's up to.
Yeah, awesome. If you guys are building smart contracts over there and you need some data off chain, definitely reach out. It's not too early. We'd love to kind of work with, we're up on testnet now. So if you want to play around with it and get some data, let us know.
Right on. And what's the best way for people to get in touch with the Teller team or stay tuned for updates?
Yeah, so you can just check out our website, teller.io. Got the whole, Discord, Twitter. We are Teller on Twitter. And yeah, we do stuff every week.
Awesome. And I'm also delighted to announce that we have a winner for the best question that will be receiving a coveted pink Kadena hoodie. And that is DXX Pack. I can't find the question that you asked, but just wanted to thank DXX Pack and everyone else for all the really, really wonderful questions. DXX Pack, presumably someone on our team will be reaching out via Twitter or YouTube, but feel free to message one of us if you don't hear from anyone. And otherwise, I think that's about all I got. Doug, any last thoughts or words of wisdom from you?
Nope. Great questions as usual. And, we'll catch us next week.
Right on. Well, thank you everyone so much for joining. It's been a delight and look forward to catching you on the next campfire.
All right.